right, everyone. We have a really interesting program today, so why don't we get started? My name is Eleanor Andersen on behalf of the Archives and Special Collections Department and the First Fridays Committee. Welcome to a new season of First Fridays. This season's theme is sensory experiences, and we are exploring the things you can see, hear, touch, taste, or smell in archives and special collections. First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor Elmer L. Andersen and Mrs. Eleanor Andersen in honor of former Library Director Dr. Edward B. Stanford. Presentations are based on materials in the university libraries, archives, and special collections. A special thank you to the interpreters from Middle English who will be providing ASL interpretation for today's presentations. And if time allows, we will have question and answer session at the end of the program. And Zoom audience members, if you have any questions for our speakers today, please submit them using the Q&A function and not the chat so that we can keep track of your questions. And in-person audience, please hold your questions until the end. There will be a tour after the presentations with Davu. And at this point in the program, we will pause for a land acknowledgement. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. And we also acknowledge that the words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for Native American students, staff, faculty, and community members. All right, introducing our presentations for today, which feature Archives and Special Collections Central Processing Unit and the University Archives. And our first presentation is Life Cycles in Archives by Micah Janette, Head of Archival Processing. And in this role, Micah works with all staff in archives and special collections to describe and process archival materials. We often don't think about the life cycle of the materials we collect. And this presentation will discuss how life cycles are archived and how the materials in the collections have life cycles of their own.
Good afternoon, everybody. It feels weird to stand up here and not introduce myself, so I'm going to also say hi, I'm Micah. I use he, they pronouns. And before I begin, I'd like to give you a little bit of context on who I am and like a teensy reminder that being an archivist, while it's my career, it's my job, and I have a life outside of the archives, which sometimes it's easy to forget for myself too. So I have been an archivist for 17 years and at Archives and Special Collections for over 11. So this presentation, I'm trying to crush all of my experience into 20 minutes. So forgive me if it's slightly tangential. I am white, remarried, queer, trans, and a parent to 3 kids. I am not from Minnesota, which is very important to know. And I grew up in a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. I spend a lot of time outside, probably to counteract the number of hours I spend in our caverns here. And I am a lover of animals, obviously, and a tolerator of humans. And because of my love of animals, a lot of my free time is spent doing chores and trying to figure out how to keep the chickens from escaping. But in my real free time, I love to run, read, and eat chocolate. And my favorite is when I can read and eat chocolate at the same time. So what is it that I do as an archivist? The official definition, or actually, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. As head of archival processing, I work with all of the collection staff at all points of a collection's life cycle. I'm not a subject specialist, and I love the opportunity to constantly be learning about new things. I train new staff, volunteers, interns. I manage our content management system. I help plan for the acquisition of incoming collections. I supervise archivists and archival assistants, students, interns, and volunteers. And I manage and supervise the arrangement and descriptions of projects, to name a few. So what is an archivist? The Society of American Archivists defines an archivist as an individual responsible for records of enduring value, which, yes, that's true, but it's also very boring. And it doesn't give any insight into what we actually do at all. So my definition, which I call the real definition, is that we are detectives, rabbit hole explorers, which you will experience in all of your First Fridays presentations. That's where they come from, all of these like little deep dives that we get to do. Memory keepers, organizers, hazmat cleaners, heavy lifters, box Tetris champions, fact savers, secret keepers, and rule breakers. So, as detectives, we reconstruct pieces of history. We put together timelines and make context connections that have long been lost. For example, in the Larry Long archives, I kept finding documents in different boxes mentioning peace cruises, one for the Volga peace cruise and another for the Mississippi River peace cruise. And by carefully looking through the records and keeping that like little nuggets in mind, I was able to piece together that Larry had participated in a peace cruise, both down the Volga River in the Soviet Union, and then was part of the team in the United States that welcomed Soviet visitors to Minnesota for a Mississippi Peace River cruise in 1989. So it takes being attentive to detail and the ability to track the breadcrumbs that crop up in seemingly random places. It is impossible not to be rabbit hole explorers. Archivists are curious by nature, and we love to learn, especially if it's learning about something that's completely obscure. So for example, and this example comes from a former colleague of mine, Gemma Close, and we work in the same room. So I got to hear all about this. If you're inventorying, for example, a collection of ice dancing scrapbooks, and you happen to find that there was an ice dancing chimpanzee named Jinx, you are going to go down that rabbit hole and figure out who Jinx is and who the subsequent Jinxes is. And then you will also want to know if there are other types of ice skating animals. And then you will tell whomever you are in proximity to about the rabbit hole you just went down. And I know now you are all going to be curious if there were other ice skating animals and if Disney ever did a Dumbo on ice. Was there an elephant on ice skates? You'll have to find out. That's your own rabbit hole. As memory keepers, we're charged with providing the context of individual personal experiences to historical context. For example, I open a box and find a rice cooker in its original box and a pair of well-loved and clearly used ice skates. So how do I know what's historically valuable and important and what has memory attached to it? So keep in mind, this collection has nothing to do with Jinx or ice skating at all. It's a complete coincidence that I chose these two topics, and probably because winter is on my mind. So keeping, let's see, where am I? Oh yeah. So these skates and the rice cooker were in boxes donated by Josie Johnson, an activist for African-American rights, the first African-American member of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents, a wife, parent, grandparent, and friend. The rice cooker is just a rice cooker that somehow ended up in a box and made its way to the archives. But the ice skates, there was no reference to ice skating in the collection, no photos, no correspondence, nothing, and I was stumped. Fortunately, I had the privilege of meeting Miss Johnson when she donated her collection, and she was happy to have me contact her with any questions that I had. Originally, I had received her permission to discard the rice cooker and the skates, but I had no problem getting rid of the rice cooker. That it was never used, obviously, and was accidentally donated. But even with her initial permission, I could not get rid of the skates. At first, I thought what was stopping me was my own connection with Josie. She reminds me so much of my grandmother. They both have unmistakable Texas drawls. Josie wears the same perfume my grandmother did. And so I thought maybe my own emotions were getting in the way. So after about a year of working on her collection and still not being able to get rid of the skates, I finally called her and confessed that I was still holding on to them. And I kept coming back to the question of their context. After she listened to my confession, she talked to me about how the ice skates reminded her of how much her children loved to skate. And now there will be a record of how often she fell. She noted that moving to Minnesota from Texas by way of Tennessee, the changing seasons were amazing for her family, and her family loved winter. And that as soon as her children were old enough to, they loved ice skating, and how they would go with friends to a nearby pond and they would practice skating, and that the skates represented a wonderfully happy period in her family's life. She said that talking about the skates and thinking of the memories, quote, reflects that at some point I was a real person. And that really stuck with me and is a reminder of the humanity that archives are a reflection of, and that I have a responsibility to retain that humanity. We are also absolutely no nonsense organizers, hazmat cleaners, heavy lifters, and box Tetris champions. We take piles of dirty, smelly, cobwebby, sometimes pea-stained and dead animal topped boxes and make sense of them, in addition to making them safe to be used by you. For example, house cats using boxes of records as litter boxes, nail clippings found in folders, dead bugs all the time, pet hair, old slippers, food, old makeup, baby teeth, mouse droppings or mummified mice, dead squirrels, death masks, and maybe the worst of all, 1980s cereal boxes with cereal still in them. That we don't have very many pictures of these things really speaks to how this is kind of ordinary. This is the day-to-day job that we do. And sometimes we just don't even bother to take photographs. Sometimes it's because it's like too much. And sometimes it's just like, okay, well, here we go. We are also fact recorders. We preserve records of historical relevance and provide evidence of things that have happened in the past. For example, we describe records of the mundane, such as annual financial reports, board minutes, or seen here, correspondence files. We retain records regarding genocide, displacement, discrimination. We also have slides of political events and music festivals, local program booklets created by long defunct community organizations like this one, the Pig's Eye Coalition. All of these are examples of and records of events that have occurred, which are rooted in truth, and that can then be interpreted in as many ways as there are researchers to interpret them. We are secret keepers. Oh, the secrets the archives have. And some of the secrets you can come and discover for yourself by using the collections in the reading room. Some are still under restriction for 1, 10, 50, 100 years. I would love to share all of the stories of secrets that I know, but that would not make me a very good archivist. So instead, I'm going to just entertain you with this photo I have been hanging on to since 2011. This is an advertisement, and I'm not joking, for a gold-plated brass uterus. It reads, "You've got what it takes. It's been a long climb and you're a success. So here's the ultimate compliment, a gold-plated brass uterus." Sound silly? Not really, because you know what it's taken to get there, and so do those around you. So let someone special know you're proud and send them a gold-plated brass uterus. It's the perfect, "I think you're terrific and you've got what it takes" gift. So you're welcome for that. And lastly, archivists are the rule breakers of the library world. Librarians are guided by very clear organizational rules, and the majority of books fit these rules. On the left, you can see a typical library stacks. I'm sure you're all familiar with going to the library. Books are clearly labeled and individually cataloged, and they're exactly where the catalog says it should be. However, archives, it is as if archives are designed in chaos, and archivists have to somehow create order however we can. There are best practices in archival theory that we follow, but just like every human is unique, special, and individual, so are archival collections. No two collections are alike, and nothing ever wants to follow the rules. So the two images on the right reflect that. In the center picture, you can see stacks of either scrapbooks or ledgers that cannot be placed neatly on a shelf and don't fit nicely in boxes. And most of them, how we identify them, they have white slips sticking out of them that identifies them, and that's it. On the far right, you can see clearly identified boxes. It looks very orderly. And in each of these boxes are tens to thousands of documents that cannot be individually identified. While item level identification is ideal, the time and available resources make that impossible. So if you take a tour and you imagine all of the boxes that lining the shelves, millions of them, there are hundreds of millions of billions or trillions, as my 7-year-old would say, of material in those boxes. In short, then, archivists are magicians. We take pallets upon pallets of boxes filled with your history, and to outsiders seemingly magically transform them into findable and accessible archival collections. So now that I've gotten my romantic interpretation of what we do out of the way, we do need to talk about archival power. Archivists protect and preserve material. We legitimize histories by making decisions about what is kept and what isn't. And by doing so, we also negate and destroy, either implicitly or explicitly. We provide access to select sources. We control the environment through which researchers have access and how they can interact with material. And we control the conditions of access. That is archival power. So the chart on the right-hand side is from the most recent Society of American Archivists census report in 2021. And you can see that 83% of archivists identify as white. When the last survey was conducted in 2004, 92% of archivists identified as white. It doesn't take stellar math skills. I did not become an archivist for my stellar math skills to understand that the archival profession is predominantly white, meaning that white culture becomes the unspoken default. It's important for me to name this because our entire profession has developed through this lens, and it impacts the ways in which archival theory and practices are maintained. It's important to me that I keep this in mind when we talk about the work that I do as an archivist and how my lived experience impacts how I describe and understand historical context. So now we get into the fun thing, and my video may not work. Let's see. That's okay. Just imagine this adult is eating a bite of food and is taken back in their memory to a warm, happy childhood experience where they've come home from being bullied at school. Their mom has made a meal for them and they are feeling loved and seen. That's the video. So by now, you may have gathered that archival work can be very dirty and a physical job, but it is also a complete sensory experience. Archival work is a study in the Proust effect, also known as involuntary memory. Our senses of touch, taste, hearing, but especially scent, have much stronger links to memory than sight. Our senses connect us to memories, and the sensory experiences that archivists have while working with material impacts our connection to the creators of the material itself. Not only are we actively creating sensory connections while we're working with the material, but it often activates our own memories as well, like knowing Josie Johnson wore my grandmother's perfume, and I then feel as if I have a closer connection to Josie because of that connection. So perfume, cologne, cigarette smoke, cedar, mothballs, the musty smells of a basement, attic, or barn all linger on paper. And taking Josie as an example, and having heard her voice and having conversations with her, I could hear her voice and imagine her mannerisms while going through the correspondence that she wrote. To participate in the unfolding of a person's lived experiences from the archivist's perspective can be incredibly intimate. Not only are we experiencing the emotional responses, recalling and creating memories while working with archives through our senses, but we are also engaging with the intimate unearthing of a person's life. We find and read the letters between two new lovers. We read the letters of those same lovers going through a divorce. We learn about the affairs. We learn about the children whose fathers didn't know they existed. We learn about the loss of a child and other gut-wrenching traumatic experiences. Josie Johnson's daughter, for example, Patrice, died in an airplane accident in 1989. I did not know this before I began working on her collection, but I began to see the signs of grief: unopened letters, photographs of Patrice and Patrice's childhood mementos, things that weren't in the collection for her other children. And in instances like this, it can feel as though I am eavesdropping on the creator's emotions, or that I have somehow accidentally opened the door to feelings that were never meant to be seen by others. Experiencing humanity in this way has a profound impact on the connections that I build with archival creators and my own experiences. Heavy, right? These boxes that are stacked on our loading docks are the building blocks for these connections with each other and our historical understanding. So now, along with keeping in mind that being an archivist is just part of who I am, and that archivists are magicians responsible for archival power, I'd also like you to keep in mind these sensory and emotional connections as I shift to talking about the life cycles of archival collections. The life cycle of an archival collection really begins when it no longer has daily value to its creator. There are three main parts to the life cycle of a collection: appraisal, acquisition, and processing. Appraisal, when possible, we like to try and conduct appraisal before the material arrives because of all of the examples on this slide. If we are able to do that, we can mitigate surprises and ensure that we're able to identify what portions of a collection should be transferred to the archives. We can take the rice cooker out, hopefully. Of particular importance is understanding the condition of the material. If we know before the arrival that we have live pest damage or mold, we can ensure that we have a plan in place to address the issue immediately. It doesn't mean that we don't take it. We just have to have a plan to make sure we can preserve it. So acquisition, as it may sound, is the part of the life cycle where we take legal and physical ownership of a collection. The acquisition process is the part I love the most because it is the dirtiest. And it's the beginning of piecing together the puzzle. It's the part where we get to uncover and begin to understand the context pieces of a collection. You really literally get dirty and also literally surprised. Imagine lifting the lid on a box and finding any of these three examples and being surprised by them. And they are all my worst. They give me the creeps the worst. Hair, stuffed animals, and dolls. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It just is. So, but sometimes we don't have the opportunities to conduct the appraisal process before a collection arrives. And even if we do, we can still get surprises, as evidenced by the examples here. And somebody may have known, yeah, we're getting a horsehair kilt piece in the collection, but I don't know that. And so I'm still opening the box and getting my nice surprise. So lastly is archival processing. Processing consists of three parts just by itself: the arrangement and inventorying of material, describing the material, and then finally providing access. This is the point where we refolder material out of hanging folders into archival folders. We address preservation issues like acid leaching and warped material and ensure that all material is clearly labeled and inventoried, and we take care of the critters that tried to hide or were smashed and left. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have never killed a house centipede and then been too grossed out to clean it up and left it for somebody else to do. So, and I kind of think that's maybe what happened to this bee here. So nice surprise for our staff to find. And it would be easy to assume that once a collection is processed and available for access, that the life cycle of the collection is complete. It's available for access, we wash our hands of it, it sits on the shelf, and we pull it for researchers and it goes back. But that is not the case for archivists. The cycle is always open for interpretation and reinterpretation. Archivists can only make educated guesses on what we think might be of historical relevance, and sometimes we get it wrong. Sometimes technology changes our ability to access obsolete formats. Time-based restrictions expire and material previously inaccessible is now publicly available, and so we need to describe it. The interests of our users change, and sometimes archival practices change. It could also be because we received funding that we so desperately needed in order to describe and arrange collections to a higher level of detail that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. These can all impact reasonings for returning to a collection in our care for reappraisal and reevaluation, which we do on a regular basis. So for us, this is why this is a circle. We are constantly doing this work on top of taking care of incoming collections. So in conclusion, I hope that my presentation has given you a glimpse into what archivists do and an understanding of the type of responsibility required for caring for archival collections, an insight into the sensory experiences, both pleasant and unpleasant, that we navigate on a daily basis. Thank you. Thank you.
Micah. All right, our second presentation today is Digitizing a Hot School Lunch by Erik Moore, University Archivist and Director of the University Digital Conservancy. What are the tastes, sights, sounds, and smells that you remember from your school cafeteria? Relive these childhood experiences while learning about the origins of hot lunch programs in Minnesota and our current efforts to digitize these materials.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I really appreciate it. Good to see so many familiar faces and some new ones as well. So I appreciate the interest and your time. So as Linnea introduced me, I'm Erik Moore, a University Archivist and Director of the University Digital Conservancy, which is a digital repository through the university libraries. And what are the tastes, sights, and sounds and smells you remember from your school cafeteria? Many of us likely share similar memories or experiences with rectangle pizza, USDA approved beef patties, and impossible to open milk cartons. Our shared experiences all stem from the 1946 National School Lunch Act, signed by President Harry Truman. The National School Lunch Program offered free or reduced meals to children in need and provided schools with access to surplus food commodities. The act traced back to efforts a decade earlier during the Great Depression, when the federal government, through the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, sought to supplement the cost of labor in preparing and serving school lunches while also aiding childhood nutrition during a time of economic emergency. These federal efforts were managed through a network of state relief agencies that directed resources to local schools. Those charged with delivering the aid were primarily women, many of whom were trained in the sciences of nutrition and home economics. In the November 24th, 1934 issue of the Minnesota Alumni Weekly, Assistant Extension Specialist Don Shannon wrote an article highlighting the role of university staff taking on additional emergency duties during a statewide drought and national economic depression. Recounting several past emergencies since the formation of agricultural extension in 1909. Shannon mentions the food conservation efforts during the World War, forest fire relief in 1918, and tornado relief in southwestern Minnesota, but declares that none of the undertakings can compare in immensity with the task of administrating the educational and organizational phases of the New Deal's agricultural adjustment programs. Staff who are now also leading these New Deal programs include F.W. Peck, the Agricultural Extension Director, who is now serving as head of the Bank Cooperative of the Farm Credit Administration, Dr. Edwin C. Johnson, Associate Professor of Agricultural Economics, as Vice President of the Northwest Production Credit Corporation of St. Paul, and Dr. R.W. Murchie, Head of Rural Sociology, directing the state's Rural Habilitation Network, and Miss Inez Hobart, Food Extension Specialist, is Nutritional Advisor to the State Emergency Relief Administration. Inez Martha Hobart, raised in Minneapolis, graduated from the University of Minnesota's College of Agriculture in 1908 with a Bachelor's of Science in Home Economics. She left Minnesota and initially taught domestic science at a school in Palo Alto, California. And then she earned a master's degree in nutrition from Columbia University in 1913. Before coming to the University of Minnesota in 1922, Hobart worked for the North Dakota Extension Service out of Fargo. Hobart's early work with Minnesota included serving as a demonstration agent for clothing and nutrition, primarily for the western Minnesota counties from Marshall down to Lac qui Parle. Hobart's interest in school-based food programs began while working with the Minneapolis Women's Community Council. Hobart tried to develop a breakfast program for an elementary school on the west bank of the Mississippi River to provide early morning meals for children whose mothers worked the night shifts or as cleaning staff in downtown office buildings. The school, and it was either Peabody or Clay, with the assistance of Hobart, established what became to be known as the penny breakfast. I'll point out the schools here briefly. Clay and Peabody. This whole area where we are right now. Hobart's work in child nutrition intervention strategies was bolstered by a national conversation, first beginning in 1922 with the publication of the Child's Bill of Rights, published by the American Child Health Association, an organization founded by Herbert Hoover during his time as Commerce Secretary. Once elected as president, Hoover hosted a White House conference in 1930 that reported 6 million children in the United States are improperly nourished. In his address to the conference, Hoover stated, "The ill-nourished child is in our country not the product of poverty. It is largely the product of ill-instructed children and ignorant parents." Not much empathy. But this type of education was the specialty of the extension demonstration agent like Inez Hobart. In 1932, Hobart publishes a short 8-page pamphlet, The School Lunch, which included Herbert Hoover's Child Bill of Rights on the cover, which reads, "The ideal to which we should strive is that there shall be no child in America that has not been born under proper conditions, that does not live in hygienic surroundings, that ever suffers from undernourishment." Hobart's home demonstration efforts emphasized 6 essentials for good nutrition. These included fresh air, sunshine, good posture, happiness, rest, and adequate food, emphasizing that the right food alone does not assure good nutrition. And in fact, many of these are part of our sensory experiences. Her home demonstration worksheets included the following maxims and dictums. Food makes a difference in growth, vigor, length of life, reproduction, and lactation. A difference between disease and health, between fair health condition and optimal health. The food for the school child must be nourishing, easily digested, and non-constipating. If the child must eat his noon meal at school, a hot dish should be served to supplement the carried lunch, and great care taken to see that the child takes the time to eat a good lunch. Hobart's philosophy on child nutrition in the school lunch pamphlet is underscored with a quote from John Dewey. Quote, what the best and wisest parent wants for their child is that what the community wants for all children. Society depends upon the health on each one of its members for its most complete realization and prosperity. Hobart actually probably studied under Dewey, or at least was exposed to his teachings while they were both at the Teachers College at Columbia at the same time. Hobart believed that the school lunch should be a vital part of this health program, one which should brings the home and school into close cooperation, as each must share in the responsibility for an adequate luncheon. 2 years later, in 1934, Hobart's The School Lunch is put into practice. Hobart is appointed the State Nutrition Director of the Social Science Division for the State Emergency Relief Administration to oversee the School Hot Lunch Project, funded by the federal government as part of the Works Project Administration, or the WPA. The purpose of the Hot Lunch Project recognized the part in which the school plays in protecting child health, especially during the emergency period, is encouraging the development of a program which will make a hot lunch, one hot dish, not hot dish, available to all children. And that the school lunch provides an opportunity to supplement inadequate meals eaten at home and to build forever the positive food habits that are so necessary for the attainment of health, a major objective of education. This is another Deweyan principle added by Hobart. So by this time, you're all wondering, well, what did they eat?
Yeah.
Right. The lunch project instructed that menus should be planned at least once a week ahead of time and posted so that students and their families could prepare accompanying food from home that would supplement the one hot meal. It was also advised that the menu rotate and not to serve the same meal more than once every 3 weeks. Menus were developed to scale depending on the student population and could be adjusted for 12, 25, or 50 servings per recipe. Food purchases were also designed to maximize available funds and minimize food waste or spoilage. A typical market order might be to provide 25 servings. A serving, by the way, was 3/4 cup per child. 3/4 of a cup. You say, well, remember that they were to supplement the hot meal with food from home. And after you see a few recipes, you might not go back for seconds either. Lima beans with bacon and tomatoes. You can see there are 5 ingredients: lima beans, water, salt, sliced bacon, and tomato. And then in the columns, we see the amounts to purchase and to prepare based on the number of servings. And then a simple recipe below. 8-minute cabbage. 5 ingredients: cabbage, milk, flour, butter, salt. rice and prunes with milk, recipes for the non-constipating, and chop suey. Probably one of the more exotic, or I would say one of the more detailed recipes that's provided. And if you'll notice, just quick notice that there is a number 7 next to the title for chop suey, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Now, as quaint as these dishes may seem, the more important factor is that these recipes were not just from some 3x5 recipe card, but instead they were developed by nutritionists from across the country who are identified in the records, including Lucy Case at the Oregon State Agricultural College, Leila Ogle, State Relief Commission of Ohio, Jenny Roundtree, University of Washington Extension, and Catherine Niles from the University of Minnesota, who also wrote the pamphlet, Canned Meats and Recipes Using It. And that final one is the footnote for chop suey. Now, we focus on this just to also understand the network that was being built between these women scientists. And their efforts during this national emergency were to keep children healthy and to possibly save lives. As a more recent comparison, when COVID struck and we were all confined to home, we rushed to buy durable foods, not knowing how long it would last or the risk to being exposed in a grocery store. At that time, University Extensionist Catherine Drager, like these women scientists in the 1930s, formulated instructions for creating affordable, nutritional, 14-day quarantine meal kits based on common food items stocked in rural grocery stores. These guides employed science, nutrition, and economics to provide for the health and to quite literally save lives. This document was the first COVID-19 pandemic-related document added to the Digital Conservancy repository in March of 2020. It was downloaded nearly 4,000 times in the first 10 days and accessed from countries as far away as Iran. Back to Hobart. Hobart's efforts were not only to support child nutrition, but to also do so in an economical and sustainable way as part of a tenet of the New Deal program. The program not only fed children, but it also paid for labor to prepare the meals and negotiated the cost to purchase food. Hobart also promoted how to apply these nutritional guides and food savings at the home level. But Hobart's efforts to demonstrate that a healthy child nutrition could be achieved in times of economic distress was met with public backlash when her ideas were misquoted by a news outlet. While attempting to provide a $5 weekly food budget for a family of 5, Hobart received a flood of letters of inquiry, criticism, and protest. Namely, the reporter had insinuated that Hobart's position was that no more than $5 a week should be spent, and this position made Hobart seem out of touch with family needs and available resources. This press release on the screen attempted to diffuse the situation and restore public trust in Hobart by stating, there is nothing in the original statement to say that families of 5 should attempt to live on $5 a week for food unless compelled to do so. But there is something to show how families of 5 and with only $5 a week to spend on food should spend their money in order to preserve the health of their members. In the second year of the Hot School Lunch Project, Hobart reported on the outcomes of their efforts. highlighting 112 schools in 27 counties received assistance. Of the 112 schools, 129 women were employed on WPA funds, totaling nearly 56,000 hours of paid labor. On average, 6,704 children were served each day, and a total of 596,979 hot dish meals were served in total. The serving per meal cost was between 1 to 6 cents. Additional success indicators included an improvement in the height and weight relationship of the children receiving the lunches, an improvement in school attendance during the cold weather, and students showed an increased ability to work, especially after the lunch hour. In all, Hobart's vision of the school lunch had come to fruition. Inez Hobart retired from the university in June of 1954 and sent her papers to the archives in December of that year. She passed away on April 6, 1980. Today's talk is titled Digitizing a Hot School Lunch. And while you saw digital representations from the collections, there's more to that than just the title. In 2023, our colleagues at the University of Illinois reached out with a proposal to develop a project that would focus on the history of women in science, particularly domestic sciences. The project would be in 2 parts. First, to digitize identified materials and collections, and second, to develop machine-generated metadata and linked data to foster deeper analysis and connections between materials around gender and networks of scientific knowledge production. The project, no longer at the margins, a digital project to amplify access to archives of women in science, was funded in 2024 by the National Endowment for the Humanities. It includes a project team at the University of Illinois, including Bethany Andersen, Mary Tan, and Kristen Wilson, an advisory board, and myself and Teresa Berger, head of our Digital Library Services unit here at the University of Minnesota. Teresa, are you? No. Teresa, along with Bella Naira, and the staff of students at Digital Library Services, provided the digitization of the Hobart papers. This included some challenges, including digitizing content that is part of a larger scrapbook and has multiple pages to cycle through. The images you've seen today are the result of their work. Here is an example of the school lunch that was written by Inez Hobart, and it was initially glued to a scrapbook, but they cycled through and digitized page by page and carefully released it from the scrapbook so they could get the back page. There was also this interesting page of newspaper clippings, which all overlap with each other and are adhered with a flap system that allows them to be moved back and forth. So they took the time to move each one and take a single shot so that we could have access to all of these online. Thank you to their efforts. On February 19th of this year, the White House issued the executive order commencing the reduction of the federal bureaucracy, with a directive that agency directors reject funding requests for such governmental entities to the extent they are inconsistent with this order. On April 2nd, 2025, notice was sent to the project lead stating, "Your grant no longer effectuates the agency's needs and priorities and conditions, and is subject to termination due to several reasonable causes. Your grant's immediate termination is necessary to safeguard the interests of the federal government, including its fiscal priorities." Yes. As difficult as that news was to receive, I'm grateful to report, however, the work continues on the project due to the efforts at the University of Illinois, including their university library and several campus departments, who fully funded the work from their own reserves. This will allow us to continue to digitize these materials and amplify women scientists who, like Inez Hobart, when faced with a national emergency, moved us all away from the margins. Thank you.
All right, we have a little bit of time for question and answer. Toby, do we have anything from the online audience? Nothing online, so we'll take some questions from in the room. Do we have a mic, Toby, or should I just point?
Pause. Oh.
All right. Saw some hands. I'm just going to start right here and we'll back for everyone.
Thank you for very illuminating presentations. Thank you. I'm interested in worry about capturing the life of ordinary people in the archives. I would guess noted individuals and celebs papers go. What about capturing the lives of just ordinary Minnesotans in their daily lives? Is that an issue or a concern of the archives?
I think for the most part, the collections that are represented are of ordinary people who do sometimes extraordinary things or are just living their lives. For example, the Immigration History Research Center Archives has the archives of immigrants and migrants to the state of Minnesota. And their existence in the archives is because of their experience. And same with the Treader collection of LGBTQ plus histories, like normal people living their lives and going through the world about their daily business. And sometimes the events that they come across are historical in nature, and sometimes we don't know if there will be connections made in the future where they are. So I think that there's a balance, and unfortunately, sometimes the famous or extraordinary get more attention, but it's the everyday people who really, I think, their histories and experiences make up the archives.
This person's had the hand. Ma'am in the middle there, did you have your, yeah.
I noticed
Wait, we have a microphone for you. We're trying to capture the questions on mic. There you go.
I noticed the university farm on several of those documents. Can you explain what, why, when?
Hi, well, just briefly, one of the university's areas is agricultural education, and the university farm is actually referenced to what we think of today as just the St. Paul campus. Yeah.
And then there's.
I'm going to grab it before it goes by. Okay, Micah, on one of your slides, you said something about control researchers. That's an exact quote. I'll give this something to tell us what that is.
Sure. How many of you have been into the reading room and used an archival collection? Okay. So when you go in, if you want to see archival material, you have to sign in. You talk to somebody first. Usually you email or call. We find out who you are, usually what your research topic is, and then we provide you with the material. So when you come here, you have to sign in. You have to say, you have to agree to not break the rules. You sit in a reading room. You can't take the material out, and you're watched. You are literally watched while you are using the archival material. So that's what I mean by controlling the researcher. We provide a very intense environment in which a lot of people may not feel comfortable with to engage with archival material. So, yeah.
A quick comment before my question. In your definition of an archivist, you said rule breakers. But thus users of the archives can't break the rules. So my question is, you had the life cycle of an archive and you didn't have the final stage in the life cycle. You ever disaccession archives?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're rule breakers first because it's very hard to follow the rules when the collections don't want to. Like they really have lives of their own, and we can have a set plan and it never is followed. I'm sorry, I already forgot the second part of your question. Deaccessioning. We do occasionally deaccession material. And that goes through a very long, thoughtful process where we have to reconsider, is there historical value? Is it being used? Is there another place that could use it better than we can? Does the family want it back? So it's not something that we make decisions on very often. But yes, that would be the final end. And I didn't even include it because we so rarely consider that as a final option.
This is about school lunches. I'm a volunteer at the state's largest food shelf. Just had its 50th anniversary. And due to current administration policies and decisions, the amount of food that we are receiving from, usually that we get from government surpluses is slashed. And hence, rather than giving our clients 2 visits a month, they can only get 1 visit now, and we limit severely the amount of food they get per person. School lunches for these families, people with children, are even more important now. We're sort of in terms of food stability situation back in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, is anybody collecting data, documents, information about the current school lunch crisis? Because I'm sure that the school lunches are not receiving the kinds of government surplus cheeses and eggs and things like that that they used to get.
I wish I could give a good answer to your question. My answer is I hope so. We in the archives probably aren't receiving anything right now that would document that. Although, to be fair, we see the work that happens in extension and the agricultural extension, and like the example I gave of the work that was done during COVID. We see it's a very, very responsive program and research. So it would not surprise me if that wasn't happening.
Question. I'm old school. I like printed stuff. I'm challenged when it comes to doing online searches. Do you have any printed finding aids for your collections, booklets? Or do you offer any instructions on how to find stuff?
We do not, but the many different archives and special collections libraries that are in this department all have individual archivists and curators that are in charge of them. And if there's a particular research interest that you have or a collection that you're really interested in, we encourage you to contact those archivists and curators, have a conversation with them, and see what they can do to help you either navigate the collection guides that are available online, because they can be really powerful searching tools, or these fully searchable digitized collections that Erik was describing. Those are really powerful tools for digging deeply into the history. However, if the paper format is one that works best for you, I know that I have certainly exported, PDF files of the inventories for my collection for researchers that, for a variety of reasons, are not in a position to navigate the ones that are online. So sort of on an individual case-by-case basis, I would encourage you to have that conversation, because we're all about access and making sure that people are able to discover what we have and find a way to help them use it. I'm sorry to cut off the rest of the questions, but we're at time, and I've got a couple of announcements, and we also have tour ready to go. So thanks so much for your interesting questions. We always love to hear what you're thinking. If you're interested in a tour, at the end of the program, Davu is in the back and will take you to see our storage facility. We have some exhibits going on right now. Across the hall in the main gallery is Indivisible, celebrating 25 years of the Treader collection in GLBT studies that is closing soon. So this is your chance to see it. Downstairs in the Bell Gallery, which is inside the Wallen Center, is Local Roots, Global Reach, a Century of the University of Minnesota Press. And we have a new exhibit opening soon. There's going to be an open house on October 15th, starting at 11 o'clock. And the exhibit is Beyond the Page, Preserving the Spirit of the University and Independent Student Press. So we hope you will visit all of those exhibits. Thanks so much for coming, everyone.